Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of technical death metal, exploring death metal. That's technical. Today we're going to be checking out the band Necrophagist, which we've certainly had on the channel before. The song we're looking at is Stabwound. This whole time I thought it was called Stabward, like forward, but in the direction of stabbing. Stab wound makes more sense, but I wouldn't think of that as one word. Anyways, it comes off of their Epitaph album, and I found this to be interesting because it's only 2 minutes and 48 seconds. This is going to be a wild ride. Let's dive into it and see what Necrophagist is bringing to the table today. Really fast 4/4 to start with. Ooh, I was gonna say, we got some classical ideas there, but the arpeggiation directly leans into that. The bass coming through, yeah. Just coming in with that harsh vocal is the only sounds. The use of silence is fantastic. Yeah, very cool. The semicolon response of the two guitars into the duet. Yeah, short, sweet, to the point, does what it needs to do, and gets out. That is razor focused. Interestingly, too, there's not a lot going on, despite there definitely a lot going on in it. It feels a lot longer than just 2 minutes and 48 seconds, but by the same token, we have a verse and a chorus as far as riffs and drum patterns go, and we hear those 3 times, and then we have the not even halftime, just slower section. It's more than halftime. Guitar duet stuff going on in there, and then we come back to the verse chorus again. We get our third follow through on both of those. So there's really only 3 riffs in here, but it feels like a lot more than that, and that's what I think is really interesting. And I think it's because each riff itself is multi-layered, it's multifaceted. There's more than just the riff to it. In fact, I'd say the riffs exist within larger patterns where we go through cycles. That might be a bit odd. Usually the phrase is the riff, but I hear multiple riffs within the phrase, and I kind of view them all as a singular thing, more so than divvying it up and saying, oh, there's, 3 riffs in our verse here. And I think that's what keeps it driving forward, keeps the interest going. So let's dive into it. I mean, this is a very riff-heavy song. To me, it's the key element. It's what makes it all work. It's what makes it cool. It's the guitar work. I mean, the drums are... We'll get to some of that later. Guitars. Alright, there is a lot of pedal tone stuff in here. Some of it I feel is just rule of cool pedal tone work that metal guitarists love, but other times I feel like there's some really cool stuff in it. Like in the second bar of our opening verse, we have this constant jumping back and forth between a higher pitch and our pedal tone, and it's so quick because of the speed that we're playing at and the fact that we're playing 16th notes, and there's something about just that rapid movement, might even be octave based, I don't know. And then hearing the 2 guitars play it, having that distance around the listener, and having that vertical movement with the horizontal placement, and it's just something about that one section that absolutely works. And I think it's one of the coolest things going on. It isn't even a rising idea. We just have pedal high, pedal high, pedal high. It's the same 2 notes, but just the speed and precision of that section works so well. It just, I don't know, something about it just tickles the brain. It is fantastic. I love it. But then we have other sections which are like and we just keep coming back to this pedal tone for an extended period of time. And I get that it's like a very metal thing. It's very rule of cool. And I suppose it works on a contrast level because it does get juxtaposed with rapidly moving sections. But I do kind of wish at times, especially the third time through these sections when I'm hearing it, that we just did something else with it. Not necessarily changing that specific idea, but putting something on top of it. It'd be really cool to put one of those fast, flourishy, and just throw some arpeggiation on top of it. It doesn't have to be complex. Just use that as a foundation for something else, because it does end up feeling very foundational to me, and it frequently appears when we have vocals, so that spotlight where normally we would have some lead guitar work is given to the vocals, which is textural and rhythmic and not melodic, and we just end up with these sections that are lacking melody in many ways. And I would have loved for either to have some melody on top of it, give me some more guitar work, or to change some of those more foundational guitar riffs to introduce more melody into them. Now, that's not to say that they don't find melody and pedal tone simultaneously. With the general speed of this, we can continue to jump between pedal tones and other notes, and it'll have that rule of cool sound, but also have a melody if you focus only on the sounds that aren't the pedal tones. And this is also a staple of metal music. Thrash does this a lot too. You hear it all over the place in the realms of metal. It's the perfect combination of rule of cool, rhythmic and textural stuff, and melodic writing, and keeping up the speed and intensity that something like this absolutely needs. And I do like those parts. I think that is a really cool use of it, and even what I was talking about earlier with the repetition of the higher note and the pedal and just bouncing back and forth, that actually works really strongly because it comes right after a lot of vertical movement as far as melody is concerned and pitch. And so we come off of all that to this super repetitive sound, but it works in contrast while also utilizing that pedal tone for immediate contrasting effect. It works on a lot of levels. And I'd love to hear more stuff like that. But as I mentioned, even just the idea of having that consistent pedal tone at the beginning of each riff, it is itself contrast because it's a static element versus a lot of the rest of the riffs which are moving. So, like, on one hand, I get it. But, subjectively, it's just not my cup of tea. I'm not a real big fan of heavy pedal tone usage in riffs. But it's also something that pops up all over metal. However, I do think that Necrophagist utilizes it to great effect the majority of the time, and they do try to keep things interesting and not rely too heavily on it, primarily just to introduce, well, space. Let's talk about this for a second, right? So, yesterday we listened to Beyond Creation. Is that what they were called? Um, and they had a very slow moving idea of technical death. In fact, I even said that they might be called technical death doom because the song tended to be a lot slower. And when we listened to the way that they crafted a melody, there was a lot of spaciousness in there. It was paced really well. And that some notes just got to be held out. They utilized eighth notes, quarter notes, half notes, 16th notes later on in the song. There's a lot of rhythmic diversity going on in there. Here, though, Necrophagist still wants to utilize some of these elements. They just don't want to get away from 16th attacks. And how they do this is that they fill any space where they would hold a note into, what do we get? Pedal tones. This is actually a really neat thing, and again, this isn't something exclusive to Necrophagist. Lots of metal musicians do this. It's sort of the point of using pedal tones in fast riffs like this. But if we get rid of the pedal tones completely, and instead of silence there, we just extend the lengths of all the notes that came before it, we'll actually end up with something that has some 16th note movement to it, but is primarily a series of eighth notes. All they really did was chop all those eighth notes in half and then interject these pedal tones between them. It's what gives it that feeling of speed, that ferocity. It wouldn't feel the same if they focused just on the melody. So they double the speed of it without actually changing that core melodic line, which keeps all of the key notes in the same places, which is why it's such an effective melodic tool. And then they also get this increased intensity out of the speed of the playing. It works on a lot of levels. You know, when I say that this is a subjective thing about the pedal tones, me not really enjoying them that much, it really is subjective. There is a really good musical reasoning behind why this sounds so cool, why it works so well, and why it is a style of metal composition that has lasted through the decades. There's a lot of music theory behind why it works. And a lot of that is about this illusion of space. I hear a lot of the pedal tone work, especially when we're bouncing between it and another note. It stands out to me so strongly, but I wonder if most of the people, most casual metal listeners, if they're only hearing the melody, the higher notes, and how they work together, and that the pedal tones that exist between end up being more of a textural thing than a melodic thing. It isn't just a note bouncing all around, it's this melody that sits up top and this cool little sound underneath it. Maybe they don't even hear the sound underneath it. But yeah, there's a lot of reasons for why it works, and it comes down to introducing space without reducing rhythmic intensity. And Necrophagist does this very well, not to mention that it's super precise. It's just very intricate, and they don't really seem to drop timing anywhere on this. It is just a ridiculous display of skill. Two things I don't really have much to say on are the drums and the vocals. They are both competent at what they do. I can't make the sounds the growler vocalist guy can. I certainly can't play like the drummer can, but they are both certainly the glue that holds all of this together, while the bass has its sparse but frequent enough moving lines, and the two guitarists are just constantly shredding. The drums, they're very straightforward, blast beats, lots of attacks, while keeping a very technical, precise, rigid rhythm to everything, very robotic style of drumming. And the vocals are just that growl all the time, monotone, never get away from it, always growling at this pitch. And so they are the two standard things that act as the very strong, stable foundation for all of the wild, melodic, harmonic, rhythmic things that the guitarists want to do. Actually, as I mentioned yesterday in that Beyond Creation, I really hope that's the name of their band. In that video, that most of the time you get some technical or progressive music that just has something going off like a flurry, you're going to have some instrument that happens to move to the other end of the spectrum doing something super simple because it needs that counterweight. It needs something to be a strong foundation to build off of. So that's what the vocals and the drums act as here. All of this takes us to the bridge, which I quite enjoyed. It was a time to bring the intensity down a little bit and listen to something that's a bit better. I don't want to say better. It's differently paced in that we can have notes being held out. I usually refer to these types of solos as tasteful. It's not so much about showing off the skills, but about crafting a narrative and supporting the song. I don't necessarily know that this section supports the song in any way. It actually runs against everything the song's trying to do outside of this bridge, but I do like the idea of slowing things down, holding some notes out. I love all of the ways that the two guitars play off of each other. One will have this really nice run, hold out a note and begin to fade. Another one will rise up, usually with some sort of a rising in pitch of skipping around ideas. I don't think they're arpeggiations, but it's close to an arpeggio. It's the same idea. We're going to go up the scales by a set amount of steps each note in order to rise the pitch quickly rather than going up each step at a time. Arpeggiations go from root, third, fifth, and then to the octave, which is the root for the next octave. If you do like root, fourth, seventh octave, it might sound a little strange. I mean, the arpeggiation is the way it is because it's good contrast and that or good tension, and then the strongest note interval, which is the fifth, and then your octave, which is also a really strong interval. And that's why arpeggios sound so great. It's just really key notes in a scale. But you can pick any notes and then jump up, an octave every 3 or 4 notes or something. And that's what the guitarists give us. This really fast rise up, like 2 octaves, in order to hit a note that's in the same area as the previous guitarist and sort of continue their solo, but in a way of passing the baton on. And then this guitarist plays for like 4 bars or 8 bars or something. They hold out a note, and then the other guitarist comes back in with another rising idea, and then we have the duet. And it's just this really beautiful dance that these two guitars are putting on for us. And just passing the spotlight between the two of them and then harmonizing with the duet is just a gorgeous section. And like I said, we utilize things that aren't just 16th notes. We have longer note lengths here, which allow us to create a little bit of syncopation and rhythmic diversity that at least appealed to my need for a little bit of rhythmic contrast in this track. And then we just pull it right back out to another verse chorus. We head back into that. The one thing that I forgot to touch on that I wanted to, and it's not really something I want to dig into, just a simple comment here, is that I love how the chorus, the end of the verse moves away from that pentatonic metal sound into a more classical harmonic element. And we get that a little bit of arpeggiation at the end of the verse, and then it takes us into our chorus, which leans a lot more heavier into the classical composition. And I just love that little transition that allows us to get into that, while also allowing them to showcase a little bit more of their chops outside of the pentatonic stuff. So yeah, I thought that was a really neat way to do that. It makes everything feel fluid and allows them to write in both styles. And then, of course, we get to hear a really strong classical style of writing in the bridge. All of it works together really nicely. Let me hit some lyrics on this, and then we're going to wrap this video up. I was looking at the lyrics real quick. There's not a lot of them. There's a chorus, which is 2 lines long. Stabwound, which is just a single word line that shows up 4 times, and then 2 2-line verses. Not a lot going on. And that's when it kind of hit me. I was like, wait a second. This is 2 verses, 2 choruses, but we had 3 verses, 3 choruses in this track. And that's when I remembered something really interesting about the structure, was that our first verse-chorus combination comes up without vocals. We get the guitar, drums, bass, the instrumental verse, then an instrumental chorus, instrumental verse with the vocals, instrumental chorus with the vocals, and then to our bridge. And then we finish the track up with the full chorus, full verse, full chorus. And so while we do have the typical A B A B C B, well, technically this one A B A B C A B, which is what Metallica loves to do, actually. We have a lot of older heavy metal that comes in with the third verse. It's not too popular in post 2000s. There's a lot of 90s metal that goes for that third verse before the final chorus though. But we still have that very standard structure, but it's just our first A-B don't have vocals to them. I think that's really interesting. They stick with the standard structure, but only have 2 vocal verses. Anyways, like I said, there's not a lot of lyrics here. The chorus says, "The blade that stabs a back, unsuspecting, forms the symbolic." It's a song about getting backstabbed. That's about it. The symbolic element of figurative backstabbing, of just being betrayed by somebody you know. And then after each verse and chorus is the word stab wound. That's it. Just nothing else around it. Just sits there by itself. Yeah, that's it. The verses: invisible blades penetrate, whereas stab wounds are not detectable. I don't understand that, unless we're again talking about a figurative backstabbing. But I mean, stab wounds are still detectable. They're still going to leave a cut on your body. So I'm not too sure about that. And then the second verse says, "There's no shield to protect from attacks led by the ones we used to trust." Again, leaning back into the idea of being betrayed by somebody you were close to. That's what the song's about. Very short, sweet, to the point as far as the vocals, the lyrics are concerned. That matches the very razor-honed and focused musical component as well, cramming all of this in under 3 minutes, having some sick riffs, a cool little slower burn section. It's not even a slow burn, it's just a very cool slower guitar duet, and then wrapping the song up, and we're done. Like, it knows what it is, it knows what it wants to do, it does it, and it's finished. Definitely does not overstay its welcome, and neither do the lyrics. They say what they need to say, and they're done. There's nothing flourishy about it. It's very straightforward and concise. Does not use more words than the vocalist needed to get this point across. I understand it's about being betrayed by somebody, and he did that in like 30 words tops. It's kind of fantastic how concise it is. Alright, that wraps up my thoughts on Necrophagist Stabwound. Stab Wound. There's only one of them. There's only one of them. Let me know what your thoughts are about this track. If there's anything you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on, maybe you just want to add your own thoughts, opinions, and perspectives to the conversation, put all that stuff down in the comments section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you to this menu right here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell, I greatly appreciate all 3 of those. That wraps it up for this one. We do have a special selection coming up next. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.